Let's get into the details of how the history of a full planet was shifted, for example, with 1,000 years back in time. In the Middle Ages, people used to write years in a different way, not the way we write them now. There were two ways in the Middle Ages to write the name of our Savior Jesus Christ. One was Jesus and the other one was Christos. And when people meant that a certain event happened 300 years after Jesus Christ, they placed an I in front of the number of the year. An alternative version was to place the letter X, and that originated from the name Christos, because that is how, till nowadays, the Slavic people call our Savior Jesus Christ. For example, Ludovici Elsevier is considered by the mainstream historians to be a Renaissance publisher. However, as we can see on their own emblem, the year is 595. Before this year, we see the letter I and a dot after it. This is obviously not the number 1. Another example, according to the mainstream history, this is 1521. However, if you pay attention, this is clearly the letter I. This is not the number 1, and it is separated with dots. Another example, this is interpreted nowadays as year 1656. However, we can see that it actually has the letter I instead of 1, and the year written is 656. There were different handwriting styles of writing the letter I. Here is another one from Germany. This is year 658. However, it is interpreted nowadays as 1658. Same on the next example. This is from Nuremberg, Germany, and again, there is no doubt that this is year 699, and there is a letter I in front of it. This is not the number 1. 1 was never written in this way. While the previous writing was before the introduction of the ideas of Scaliger, this is the same location, but the paintings are from the 18th century. And here we see how the letter I has been substituted with the number 1, and in this way the history was prolonged with 1,000 years. There are endless examples that this is not 1, it is the letter I. In some cases, the letter I, or in Slavic the letter X, was completely omitted. Like for example, on this map, the cartographer absolutely clearly writes that this is something referring to year 740 and 750, and yet the mainstream historians conveniently place it in year 1740 and 1750. And this is not the only such example. This is an old emblem of the city of Vilnius. It is absolutely clearly written on it, 7th century, and yet according to the mainstream history, this is city of the Middle Ages. You can click on link number 7 for more examples and much more details. At this point, you probably wonder, but how did it work in reality? How did the common people, for example, in year 600 after Christ, all of a sudden start thinking that it is now 1600 after Christ? Actually, the common people didn't even understand what happened because conveniently, exactly at that time, the calendar was changed. The new Gregorian calendar was introduced, and everything was set to the so-called correct dates, and because it was all done centrally on paper, the common people on the street did not understand what's going on at all. In this way, the history, the way you know it, appeared. It was not created by historians, but by illusionists, trickster, circus-style magicians. However, there were educated people as well, and they figured out the scam. One of them is the famous physicist Isaac Newton. Somehow they conveniently miss to tell us that he was a chronologist as well. He was persistently arguing that the history of the kingdoms of Egypt has been artificially sent to past with 1800 years. The history of ancient Greece sent artificially back to the past with 534 years, and the history of the Roman culture sent back in time artificially with about 1000 years. Those who are further interested can find more detail in his book Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended. Jan Hardwin was one of the most educated men of his time, and he also argued against the validity of this Caligari history. He was a royal librarian, and he found out that this Caligari history was founded on books that are not genuine. Actually, the list of scholars who doubted the genuineness of the theory of Scaliger is very long and continues to get longer nowadays very quickly. I have included it for your reference in the description of this video, and I would highly recommend that you have a look at it. There are many contemporary scholars listed that also maintain their websites. Some of them could be in your native language. 1000-year shift back in history was not the only one. There were a couple of others, and they were achieved with a very simple and old method, by forged documents. Let's see one example. This is a document by the famous writer Lermontov. It is used as a proof for dating historic events. It is shown in the textbooks a very low resolution. There are dates indeed on this document, and it is actually an authentic document with the authentic writing of the famous author. However, if you pay a close attention to the numbers used to write the years, you will notice something strange. The number 3 is very unusual in both cases. If we see other documents of Lermontov, we can notice that he writes 3 in a completely different manner. Attention to the very top of this page of this document. It is becoming pretty obvious that the 7 has been made artificially to look like 3, and in this way a given historical event has been sent back in time with 40 years. This is how our so-called history was fabricated. Sending events back in time is extremely convenient for the parasites. It creates the illusion that things have always been like this, creates the feeling of helplessness in the common people. They feel that they're being oppressed and manipulated. However, the authority of the parasites, represented by our rulers, so-called elected rulers, seems strong and long established. Not only the bloody parasitic phase in our history seems stronger and longer, but also the times when people were actually free seem even more distant and more elusive, as if they never existed. I've traveled a lot in my life, and in all countries people are not happy with their rulers. They do not feel that the presidents and the governments are representing their real will. And yet they feel powerless to do anything because they think that it has always been like this. One of the main purposes of this video is to make known to people, no, it was not like this always. And the times when we were free are much closer than everybody would expect.